Hello, everybody. Welcome to the State of Decay 2 stream. I am Jeffrey Card, and over here we've got our special guests of the day, Jordan Stock and Alex Thomas. In fact, let's get over here. Yeah, so that's Jordan Stock, senior sound designer, and Alex Thomas, also a sound designer. This is our sound design team. There's one more person on the team, who is Kevin Patzold.
Audio director.
Who's our audio director. He's out of town these days, but he's going to probably come back and do a show with us about maybe the soundtrack of the game.
Yeah.
But for right now, let's switch over into this mode so that we can get into talking the game. So everybody in the chat, what we're looking for is questions about video game audio. You know, what it's like to be making these sounds, like what kind of thought and artistry goes into it, what the physical process is. I mean, there's a lot of questions you might have. So cue those up, and I'm going to get started playing the game. Brant's going to join us pretty soon. He's running a little bit late, but I'm going to get started playing the game. And I actually have one. You guys have headphones right there if you wanted to put them on, or, you know, they might not be up to your usual standards of headphones. So
I guess we won't be able to hear what you're talking about anyway. So.
That's true. So I have a question that I wanted to kick off with, which is when I start a new game, or when I begin the game, there's this sound, and I don't know where sounds like this come from. I'm gonna push the button here.
Adventure game.
Yeah. So like that sound, I don't hear that in nature anywhere. I don't know where you got it. Like, is it a synthesized sound? Did you record it from something, manipulate it from something? Like.
Yeah. Geez, I probably made that, I don't know, 2 years ago. So it's gonna be a little hard to know exactly what's all in it. But basically, there's a lot of layers in that. So it's not one thing necessarily. It's not one recording manipulated. It's multiple things recorded. Or coming from commercial libraries or my own library, usually a mix.
So you say your own library, I mean just things that you have recorded over the course of your career that you just sort of keep a giant stack of so that you can bring it in whenever you need it? Or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all sound designers usually, have a personal library, things that they've recorded over the years, things that they've used to work on other games with, and it's the building blocks that they use maybe for some other game, and then you just keep all that source material, catalog it, and then save it. Save it for a rainy day, for the day that you work on something that needs it again. And I had worked before here at Airtight Games, and we did Murdered, Sole Suspect.
Oh, that's right.
Who play those kind of games.
That would have had a lot of like otherworldly weird sounds in it.
Yeah, so that attracted me to that job, to make like a ghost world, right? I hadn't kind of seen anything like that in a game before. So while I was there, I was just generating lots of source material of ghostly whooshes and eerie noises and those kinds of things. And so I have just thousands of sounds of ghost stuff. And
wow.
When you're thinking about that opening sound, well, I was thinking like some kind of booming enter the game sound, and then it's a horror game kind of at its core, right?
Yeah.
So some of that ghostly element, and so it's kind of a mix of some kind of a boom sound, and then probably several layers of these like ghostly screaming, reverbed out elements.
It's so interesting that like we've got just everything you do in the game makes subtle little sounds, like little clicks and little moves, and all of these sounds, they're not things that actually like happen in real life. Like, definitely everything you do in real life has a sound, but not these exact sounds. Is like, it must be interesting, like how, people's expectations for like what stuff sounds like has kind of built up over time. Like it's not bleeps and bloops anymore. Like you can always tell when a director of a TV show has never played a video game before, and they have a kid playing a video game in the show, and it's making sounds like it's from a 1980s arcade.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that now is kind of informed by the art direction in games. So, when we look at UI, for instance, and its clicks and things like that, we think about what is the art direction of the UI here, and what sonically is going to fit in with that and reinforce that. So that's sort of the first thing we look at when we're thinking about what we're going to do for UI stuff. And then the second thing is what is going to be kind of satisfying to hear. You're going to be clicking through these menus constantly, especially in our game. We're pretty rich with UI menus.
Rich is a good way to put it.
And,
drowning in them might be another way.
And so you spend a lot of time in there. So we got to define a palette of what's gonna be consistent across the board, what's gonna support that art direction, and then B, what's just gonna feel nice tapping through menus and clicking buttons. And so that was the direction we went through, was kind of more tactile feeling, and sharp clicks. And so spent a lot of time actually making a unique set of sounds for each menu that still exists within the palette of that UI stuff. So it's very subtle, but you'll notice when you back out of, say, the settings menu, you're hitting the back button 4 times maybe to get from, if you're way deep in there and you're in the key bindings, you're backing out of the key bindings, you're backing out of the next sub-menu, you're backing out of the pause menu, all the way back to the main menu, right?
Yeah, so we don't want that whatever sound is on that, you don't want it to be weird and repetitive and start to grate on the player. It has to be something that's subtle and fits and just feels natural.
Right. So it's almost like a cadence of like click, 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 or something like that, as you back out. Just a little, it's subtle, but it's enough.
So the sound actually
to
changes
kind of
a little bit?
Keep it intricate. Yeah, it's a different sound on every one of those.
That's interesting. I didn't even realize that.
There's-
It just disappears in the background. It's like you're doing your job right when no one notices you're doing it, right?
Kinda, yeah. Audio is one of those things where if it's wrong and if it's off, the average person will pick up on that and go, this just doesn't work for me at all. This doesn't make any sense. But yeah, usually if it's just working right, it just kind of fades into the experience as a whole.
A Squad Gaming wants to know about the audio associated with the feral specifically. Now, a lot of that came from the original game, right? The way that the feral sort of sounds. He says that it's creepy as hell. It's just like, I don't know, was curious about sort of the thought that goes into creating a character with those kinds of creepy noises.
Yeah. Do you want to jump in on this one, Alex?
Well, I mean, that might be something that Kevin will already answer, since he was the one who did them originally for the first game.
Yeah.
And he kind of took that kind of original thought idea and then, reprocessed, relayered, and, did that well before I started.
But speaking in general terms, like, when you are creating a character and they've got to have some kind of like monstrous, sound to them, like I don't know, is there a process that you go through to like figure out like, well, is this, what sources to use, you
can kind of take a few different approaches at it. You can use your own voice as really expressive. You can create any sound just in your head by using your voice, which has an amazing ability to.
Oh, that's true.
Our vocal cords and the way our mouth are shaped and the formants we can produce. So you can do a lot with that. It all inherently sounds human a little, which is great for zombies and things that
yeah,
are
that's
derivative
true.
Of humans, because that's where those came from, and you can use different kinds of materials or just for animals and recombining them for different monsters and stuff. You want to look at kind of like how they're shaped. Are they guttural? Are they big? Do you think they would be how would they be making the sound? Is it are they having like mandibles on them that make clicky sounds, or are they, or are they like, how big are they? Are they small? What's, a lot of the, stuff you'll see in art has a real world sort of analogous feel to it. You can kind of play off that, or do something completely different, or just take some sort of metal screech and pitch it down 4 octaves, and that's it.
And suddenly it sounds like something's voice.
Yeah, and so stuff that is really rich and harmonic is really easy to play around with, like growls and stuff like that.
So a lot of the time, do you find like the sound you actually end up using for something comes from a very different real world source than the actual thing it's supposed to be representing in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that kind of the right sound is always the right sound. It doesn't really matter where it comes from. So it could be from, you taking a can of dog food and turning it upside down and making a squish sound. That could be the right sound. Or it could be this crazy layered approach of melting things and doing all this, whatever you can think of. And oftentimes I find that starting one way, you'll start it on something, you'll think you'll have the right idea, and then by the time you're at the end, you just have gone through so many different things that it's not even what you thought it would be.
Like the original source you're using is just gone from the sound
Yeah.
now. You're in a completely different place.
Yeah, and then you're trying to work that in somewhere, and you're like, I just have to ditch it, and then.
Brett, you gotta sit closer because your face is getting divided in half, and you are the eye candy of this show. So,
Sorry, I was late.
oh no, that's fine.
Important phone call and such.
Well, so I should give some credit, by the way. It wasn't just A Squad Gaming that was asking about creating sounds for ferals and stuff. Hansel Adola was also asking the same question, so I'm glad you guys got into it.
I mean, it's good that it's informative to people. They can hear the feral from far away. They can, and that's a lot of the implementation and deciding how far you can hear something away. You want to be able to know that it's coming at you before it actually is near you to kill you, because that could be life or death, is that one scream.
And that's a good point. So you guys actually also, you have a lot of control over, like, not just, like, what the sound is fundamentally, but also, like, how far away the player can hear it, like, whether it comes through in stereo or like, if it's something, if it's locational, like what...
Yeah, I
You're
mean,
creating sort of world around the player, right?
I mean, like, the implementation is 60%, whereas the sound is really only like 40%. So it really is how the sound plays in the game is almost as important, or if not more important.
So yeah, so you could have all of the right sound files,
Yeah.
but still have terrible audio in a game if you haven't put
Yeah.
it together right. And
Yeah, that's something we spent a lot of time on near the end of the project. You hit content complete, and then it's time to, like a film, you do your mix. You've got all your elements in and working, and now it's time to see how all those elements play together, and think about things like what the player experience in the end is going to be. How far away should they hear that feral? Probably pretty far. It's a dangerous thing, and we want you to be scared, and we want you to be also informed that it's nearby.
Yeah.
So you're not totally taken off guard, and it's not maybe unfair that you didn't know it was coming at you, right?
I was playing last night, and it was dark like this, and I was running around a house, and I had been fighting some zombies, and then I heard in the back of the house, I heard that scream, and I dropped everything and ran to the car and drove to the other side of the map. I was like, fighting
awesome.
a feral at night, not for me. It's
Yeah.
just not going to
That's
happen.
great. That's the effect we're going for, and a lot of stuff goes into creating that effect. We could send more of his voice to Word, which gives him a more distant feel. If he's in the house, his voice is going to be occluded by the walls, so you're going to be informed that he's somewhere in the house and he's behind some walls, but you definitely know he's in the house because it sounds like he's coming from another room.
Yeah, the
Like it sounds
occlusion
like
work
your
you
own
guys
house.
did for this is
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
because humans don't always realize all the information that their brain is parsing out from just like those sound waves that are coming into being interpreted by our brains. Like
Yeah.
we figure out a lot of information that we don't realize we're figuring out, but you have to think about all of that stuff when you're designing the audio for the game.
Yeah, in a way, right, everybody has like a secret power with how you perceive the world. It's just something that we all do and all kind of take for granted in a way because we've just been doing it our whole lives. But yeah, you can tell
always wanted to
how
drive
far
one of
away
those.
something is because of the way it is or organically shaped. You can tell when something is behind walls because of the higher frequencies are muted, and we pick up on that difference and those changes. And so it's our job in a game like this to do as best we can to recreate the physics of the real world, and then allow the sounds coming into your headphones to emulate all those same features of the real world.
Speaking of sound, that guy just screamed and everyone turned around. I was trying to sneak down. I was like, doo 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 doo. He's like, hey guys, dinner's served.
You're so patient.
So I should. Speaking of patience, I appreciate that the chat is being so patient with us because we have fallen behind on the questions. Dark Elf V1 asks if there's a particular sound or effect that was particularly hard to get right. Do you guys can remember?
Hard to get right.
Like you had to do a lot of iteration on it.
Yeah.
So you got sick
I
of
have
it?
my answer to that, but
Yeah,
I'll let
Jordan, you go first.
You want me to go
Yeah.
first? Hard to get right. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but we spent a fair amount of time on UI stuff, and that's kind of picking that direction of where that palette's going to go. We played around with analog synthesizers, and that was a little bit more bleeps and bloops. We didn't want it to sound classically 8-bit, but we broke out the old synthesizers and tried to process them in a way that they sounded sort of retro, but not retro but modern. You know, we were playing with a twist on that.
So it would have been kind of like they would have had kind of some tones, some music to them instead of the current like swishes and clicks that we have right now.
Yeah, a little more like synthetic synthesizer kind of based, but that stuff just wasn't quite panning out. You know, it was an interesting idea to try and sort of take a modern twist on an old style of sound, but while the sounds themselves are cool and we continue to play with them in other ways, they just didn't fit for that aspect of the game. So that was a bit of a challenge.
What about you, Alex?
I would say for me, it was kind of more about the implementation of certain things, like the all the finisher moves, all the kind of the sequenced finishers. It took a lot of time to like really just make sure we had the right assets layered together and timed perfectly, and nothing was fighting with another thing. Was clear, and you could hear the right cloth sounds and the right movements. Things were big and fun, but they weren't just ridiculous. So oftentimes kind of starting more subtle, thinking, oh, this is going to translate really well in the game, but then when everything music is going on, you just don't hear it. So you kind of have to like put a little more extra oomph in there to make sure it's like fun, to make sure it sounds great, and make sure it's satisfying to do. Also, I felt like the distance at which you can hear water was just, I did a lot of iterations on which distance that felt good or right, and I don't know, maybe it's not even, they'll never be done with it.
Because we've all had the experience, like we're walking through the woods,
Yeah.
and you can hear a stream, but you can't see a stream.
Yeah.
You're like, there's a stream here.
Yeah.
Where is it? You know, and you're trying to create that same kind of effect.
Yeah, and you want that, but you also don't want to be really far away and have this annoying sound in your ear for something you don't know what it is, and you're trying to go, is it wind, is it grass, is there something over there, and then it's a stream, and...
There was essentially one of my favorite audio bug that I ever ran into while we were developing the game.
Bugs?
Was it there? It wasn't really an audio bug. It was half and half. I had a character. They had just set up a lot of the behaviors for characters in the base, and one of the behaviors you have is to throw up into a toilet.
Oh.
And so I had a character but they didn't have enough different options of things to do, and so because it's still kind of a new system, and so I had a character who was just persistently throwing up into a toilet again and again and again, and I could hear it from everywhere on the base. There was no occlusion, no anything. It's just no matter where I was standing, I was just constant vomiting.
Oh, I ran into one of those too, where it was like 3 people doing it.
Okay, that beats mine.
And we had all the actors do a set of their own retching, emote, if you will. And they were really good at it. Like it was like super convincing. And like they've done that. They've been asked to do that before in other games or something.
So when people get sick in this game, it's worse than just getting attacked by a zombie and bitten. They get a little bit of stomach flu, and it's just the worst thing.
Yeah, I'm one of those unfortunate people where it's like when I actually throw up, it involves my voice a lot, and so you can hear how much louder my voice is than everyone else is in the room, just even on the stream. So one time I actually got really sick and threw up at work. And I'm pretty sure, everyone was really polite. I'm pretty sure everyone could hear me.
We had to make it.
You're in the game, actually.
We could hear you.
So I should get back to some of these questions. Prime Lord Holnix has a question about the weapons. Like, so guns in particular have got a lot of they've got a different sound for when they're suppressed versus when they're not suppressed, and it seems like there's a wide variety of different sounds here. Like they want to know where did you get the sounds? Like, did you actually fire all these guns, or like what's the deal?
Yeah.
Did you bring a suppressor to a shooting range and shoot every gun with a suppressor on it, or?
No, we didn't. We actually didn't shoot suppressed weapons. Those sounds were designed. But yeah, so we hired a local guy. His name's Chris Larson, who was freelancing at the time, and he had just recorded his own gun library. So he did that heavy lifting of having gone out somewhere in eastern Washington and hired all the right people and got the mic set up and had the armor and got the weapons, and they went through and just systematically fired a lot of the same guns that we have in our game.
I so wanted to be there when they did that too.
That one was kind of just like, well, we would have loved to have been a part of that, but when we contracted him to do the initial gun setup, he just already had that.
Yeah.
And you know,
Ironically, people were having some trouble hearing the sound.
oh, I
guys.
knew it. I knew it.
I tried to do I tried to do a test earlier, speaking as softly as I possibly could because I knew you guys were kind of soft spoken, and I'm physically incapable of speaking quietly enough to,
All right.
to fully
Let
test
me know
that.
if there's any more audio problems on the output here. We're gonna.
So when I got in front of the camera, what I was doing was moving our mic in case it just looked like I just was for some reason wanting to show my shirt to the camera.
Yeah. So yeah, that stuff gets recorded when it goes through a massive editing process before it ever reaches the game, and there's sort of a how you say a design for the implementation for each of these guns, and that's. I mean, this could be a whole day, really. We have spent a lot of time tuning and tweaking and remixing and just trying to get these guns right, and even changing the way the tails work, and you know.
What do you mean the way the tails work?
The tails. Okay, so this design is about the layers of the gun. So I'll try not to spend the whole time talking about this. There's the impulse, which is like the transient crack of the gunshot. Then you've got the body, which is sort of the character of the gun that sort of sells you like that it's more of an AK versus like an SMG. It's kind of
Some
like
have
the
deeper
real-
sounds, some will have like more of a quick, higher sound.
Yeah, yeah. And they're all and these sounds are super short, really, you know.
Yeah.
And then we have a mech layer, which is just that physical like clicking of the bolt action on the weapon, and then the tails. And so the tails are used to signify to the player where the gun is fired. And this is something Alex did a ton of work on, where if you're in a large open field, you're going to get our longest tail that
It's like it's echoing in the distance.
Furthest. If you're in a tighter spot closer to a building, you get our short tail, which has like that sort of slapback effect, where it sounds like you shot close to a building and it kind of cracks off the building.
I haven't paid any attention. I want to go back into the game and like play it again and listen to the gunshots in different settings.
Yeah, and then if you're inside, you get like a big boomy kind of like tight interior, heavy tail sound.
It always gave me great pleasure to come in on Monday mornings and hear in the audio room when I get out of the elevator just this boom, 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 boom.
We spent, I don't know how many hours just listening to every gun and every iteration and every location on the map. You know, Alex knows the map so much. He's like, all right, take us to this area so we can hear these guns in this place. Take us over here. I mean, you can probably go on about that part of it.
Yeah.
We do have more questions. They want to know who did the bug splat sounds we hear when a Zed meets your car. Where did those sounds come from? Like, what did you destroy to make those noises?
Oh, all the gore when it goes.
Yeah, when you hit the car, it
yeah.
goes. You know, what is that?
Well, it's nothing specific, but you can kind of talk about like the gore layers and
Is the
stuff.
process how you do it?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, Jordan authored a whole bunch of content for, you know, what gooiness would sound like. You can, you know, I mean, Jordan, you can talk about more about what you did, but you know, smashing watermelons, different fruits, or different guts, you can like freeze leather and tear it apart. It kind of makes cracking sounds. And
So you didn't actually run anyone over.
it wouldn't sound as
one,
good.
no one harmed in the making of this game.
So it wouldn't sound as good though. That's
Yeah,
an interesting question.
trust
Like,
me, I know.
That's an interesting thing though. That doing the actual thing, you know, even leaving the violent nature of the specific thing we're talking about aside, it seems like oftentimes doing the actual thing that in real life will not give you the sound that you want to put in a video game.
A lot of things that we kind of take for granted as sounding like we think they sound comes from media and like movies and games where you know, things have been designed to sell a certain thing or, you know, being overhyped. Like guns in real life don't really sound like the guns here. They have such a high dynamic range that you hear like a plip and then the at the end. And recording that with, you know, like a phone camera, it'll just has a certain dynamic process on it that completely crushes it and sounds way different. And that's kind of what we do to kind of, you know, shape those in the way we want. And
Yeah, and I know, and there's like so many weird like conventions that have popped up over the years. Like for instance, like the sound that somebody makes when they raise a gun. Like they haven't done anything to the gun, but they raise a gun and it's like all the parts of the gun are loose. It's like clattering.
Drives me insane.
Yeah.
Or when you get
I was
the
gonna say, I hope Brant gives us a pass on that one.
when you get the pistol slide sound and they haven't done anything. It's like they aim the gun and you hear the. But the biggest one. The biggest infraction
We don't do that one.
is suppressors.
Oh yeah.
Making the pew.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I think
that became a trope. That sort of that high pitched like almost synthy. Pew, pew.
Yeah, and it's hard to get away from that, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of people who play our game who are really in the know about the way the guns sound, and you know, and they've got their expectations. But then you've got a lot of people who are only educated by Hollywood who come into the game and they're expecting a certain sound from a suppressor. Like navigating that environment of like, you know, we've got like the purists on one side and the Hollywood folks on the other side. Like, how do you even decide what sound something should make when you're caught in a trap like that?
It's like a delicate balance between what sounds realistic and what sounds cool and what sounds good in a game. And, you know, you want to feel you're the player. You want to feel powerful when you shoot that gun. You want to know that you are affecting the world with it. You know,
and it's weird how like in the case of a suppressor, like. Making the quieter it is, the more powerful you feel, right? Because you're doing something really dramatic, but with with a certain kind of subtlety. Like if you didn't feel the difference between a loud gunshot and a suppressed gunshot, the player might feel like nothing happened, right? Like it's like you have to take it out of the realm of realism in order to make the player believe that they're doing something new.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm about to die.
Let's see here. So Prime P1 Gamer was asking, will you ever change the sound of the suppressors? And
We don't have a fan.
Just take the suppressors off.
I think exactly. I think somebody he's on the purist end of the spectrum, but you know it's a complicated decision though. Like exactly where you're going to land in that spectrum.
You also notice every game sounds different. There's so many different approaches to what you want it to sound like, and you know.
Yeah.
We even started off with having a more kind of realistic approach, and we kind of gamed it up a little, depending on taste and thought.
And you know, like I was saying about the layers, I think most games these days kind of have that approach. It gives you a ton of variation because you're dealing with 5 containers of sounds, with all being randomly chosen each time that gun is fired.
Oh no.
And so you end up getting a lot of variety per shot.
Wow.
Even though it maybe is hard to hear, it's definitely happening. And
Like if it was completely 100% exactly repetitive, we'd notice. But
Exactly.
because you've got all this random variation in it, we don't notice.
Exactly.
It's almost like I don't know. It would be like tiling textures on a landscape, right?
Yeah.
Like you can tell.
You can see like the where it hit like where they connect.
You can see the tessellations,
Yeah,
then it's fake, and you're trying to like hide that in the same way that artists would.
And it's because of that approach, it gives us a lot of levers to pull with as far as the mix goes, and things can change drastically when you start cranking up the mechanical layer, for instance, and then dropping the body. Now you have a real like clack 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 kind of gun, right? And so that's where we spend a ton of time deciding how is this gun going to sound. Is it going to be more clacky? Is it going to be more thumpy? Is the body going to come out? Like what's going to make this thing sound the best? So it's not always what's the most realistic. It's just what's going to be the most satisfying to hear when you shoot this particular gun.
Rio Kuxian once says the
Rio!
water and ambient sounds are amazing, and
That's all
they
right.
notice that they change with time of day and the area that you're in, which is something that maybe not everyone noticed. Yeah.
There are 5 distinct times of day for audio. You have the dawn, day, afternoon, evening, and
Middle of the night.
and then basically midnight or whatever it is. It's funny. Even now, you can kind of like you want a little more granularity between because there's the pre-dawn when the birds start to wake up, but we just have the dawn. And
Mr. Farrell shows up.
yeah, so we have, and there's every map has maybe like 5 or 6 unique areas that kind of blend together. And those were kind of our large surround sound loops that were kind of authored by another contractor who kind of recorded all these, and he's a local guy who recorded all throughout Washington. So they're all local Washington ambiences.
Wow.
And so he gave those to us, and then we kind of cut them up and implemented them in our system and how we wanted them to play. And so that's kind of one layer. That's what I would describe as the distance layer. It kind of fills out like the tone and the characteristic of the spot you're in. And then you can kind of get down a little bit further where we have randomly generated like procedural ambient events. You know,
Like a
birds
bird going by,
flying
that kind of
off,
thing?
and the crows, and different tree creaks and wind, and those kind of are all kind of one short events that play randomly, and will kind of build this ambience that develops over time. That's never repetitive and is unique to every time you're in an area for the most part. And then we can kind of get even more closer down to very specific things where they're hand-placed emitters for every insect and every close bird you hear has been hand-placed in a particular spot of a tree and the particular tree itself to kind of build the wildlife as you're walking through. You can hear the birds off in the distance, something flying overhead, and then you can see, oh, there's a tree in that bird, or there's a cricket in that bush. And so there's, thousands of those per map were hand-placed.
And you guys went through the maps physically and hand-placed these
Yeah,
audio
Alex did.
Alex did. Well, that is that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And so and those all react to time of day. The wind gets louder in the afternoon. There's more crickets in the afternoon going into evening. Even in one of our areas, there's birds that actually sing at night, because a lot of birds actually do sing at night. And that's kind of, we kind of wanted to get away from the trope of, birds during the day, crickets at night, because they do kind of intertwine a lot. There's a particular bird around here that actually does their mating call and their migration during the nighttime, and so you can hear the birds like tweeting in the middle of the night, and it sounds completely odd, but
Let's definitely not do a game set in the South during cicada season.
yeah.
We just dominate everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then going back, we kind of wanted to do a sort of naturalistic and kind of realistic to the ecology of sort of the Pacific Northwest, Eastern Washington-ish, but we do have cicadas, which there are none in Washington. They just sound cool, and we like them.
Delzy Slayer wants to know, do you ever have to use unusual things, weird things to create sounds? We talked a little bit about watermelons and stuff like that. Is there anything that stands out to you as being like a really particularly strange thing that would surprise someone to realize that it made a sound for a video game?
Weird things. This. That's a tough one. We record whatever we can get our hands on, and we've been doing it for a while. So maybe our definition of what's weird isn't the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, you talked about things like ripping leather to
Yeah.
or
some things like certain parts of the game. You can stumble on an area that has a drone, which is sort of like a low kind of like airy tonal thing. You don't really quite know what it is. It kind of just makes you feel a little uneasy. Like it might play in a wetland area that's creepy at night, and those sometimes can be like, one of them is actually my recording of my cat meowing, and I just pitched it way down and then threw a ton of reverb on it, and it just sounds like
it's just giant evil cat.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you can't tell that it's a cat.
Yeah, and you don't really, you just kind of hear like this low drony thing. But yeah, it's a cat. There's also like just rubbing chairs across the ground, those kind of things. And
Yeah. Basically, like, it's kind of smoke and mirrors. It's not ever really one-to-one, like, with what you see and what you hear. It's always an analog of what sounds like that thing, but or could be manipulated to sound like the thing you see. But it's never really that thing. Like, we have melee weapons in our games, and in this game, and the sounds is like it's a knife stab, but we're not stabbing a knife into anything. We're like scraping two like pieces of two tools together or something, or like scrap metal or something. Just whatever makes like the quality of a scrape. That's like the sound that we want. But
Speaking of, one of my favorite sounds in the entire game is the high-end blades, the Apocalypse blades, like the rebar sword. When you finish something, it has that little shing.
oh yeah, nice.
Oh, look at that! We got a visit from Mr. 1 in 10,000.
1 in 10,000.
Oh yeah, the.
I'll see on Reddit people like, is that a bug? What's up with that?
Yeah, it's like if that had been a bug, that would have been the most amazing coincidental bug.
Going back to the previous question,
Yeah.
something you can see that's completely super literal are the wind turbines.
Oh yeah.
Right there.
Do you actually go and like record
I
some?
actually went because there's a bunch of wind turbines up on kind of one of the mountain areas above Ellensburg in eastern Washington, and I just knew that they sounded what they sounded like, and I really wanted that sound, and so I just went to it and recorded those, and then they are the sound for the wind turbines.
Nice.
There's nothing fancy about it, just placing the mic in front of it and then implementing it properly, and that's just what it was.
You made a video of that side
Yeah, I
by
have a
side,
video of
didn't
that,
you?
yeah.
And it's awesome.
Yeah, it really sounds like it's like tearing through the air. It's pretty cool.
Maybe we can post
Yeah.
that.
I mean,
Maybe
they're the
we'll
size
find
of, they're the
somewhere,
size of 747s. The
Oh, really?
the
The
wingspan on them,
wingspans?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
That was a great sound.
Black Ops wants to know if what his specific question is. Can you add some special music when we defeat Blood Plague on a map? But I think that gets to kind of a larger question about like, the decisions you make about integrating music rather than sound effects into something. Like, the players accomplish something and now what they get is a music stinger. Instead, like, how do you sort of decide what gets music and what just relies solely on more traditional audio?
Yeah. I don't want to go too deep into this one because this is
I guess it's more Kevin's
This is
area.
Kevin.
Kevin,
This is
Kevin
definitely-
did the whole music system.
this is
so-
definitely his expertise. But I'll just say, music's a more powerful tool than sound to elicit an emotion, and in some cases you're looking for.
Where are you?
Look where it told me. Look, I asked for food resources, and look where they send me. It's
Nice.
like, oh no,
Good luck.
you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Hey, that's where they are. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, so but it's also, can it be just a little bit more of like it's a powerful instrument, but it can be sometimes too powerful. Like maybe there's some things that you explicitly don't want to put music on.
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, it's easy to fill out something wall to wall with music, and you'll notice this game. Kevin spent a lot of time with thinking really hard about how long you don't want to hear music, and if you're just wandering around and hearing the ambience, we let the like exploration, we call it, come in and last for a little while, but then we'll just let it go away, and it's all meant to just kind of like seamlessly work together and just reinforce what you're doing, and there's a very complicated system behind what controls that, and the system is looking at what the player's doing and what's going on in the world, and then making decisions and dice rolls sometimes.
Well, I love
what's gonna
the
happen.
fact that this game allows us to have moments of pause, and you guys fill those moments with either a choice of music or letting us just sort of live in that moment in peace. I think it's important. Like a lot of modern games I can't play anymore because they feel like they need to be every Bruce Willis action movie crammed into half an hour, and I can't breathe in those.
If
and the
everything sounds awesome, then nothing sounds awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
a
so
really
you
point.
need some contrast, and you need some.
I appreciate the fact that there are moments that like the music system reacts to my decision to like take a breather.
Yeah.
Albert wants to know, is there a sound effect for distant screams of survivors? I'm convinced I keep hearing screaming in the distance.
I'm
Better
glad
go
you
find
got to that one.
Sorry, try.
No, that's the
Yeah, the sort of there are
What do we
these
call
sort
that
of
system?
like
The ambient?
distant scenes that play in the ambience in certain areas where you might hear a light gunfire and somebody screaming, and it's so far away that you don't really know where it is, so you can kind of go over there and something might have happened, or something happened and maybe somebody died, or there was a car crash, and it's very suggestive. It doesn't, it's tied to a sort of a supposed action rather than a actual thing happening in the world. But you will hear some distant zombie screams, some sort of crashing through windows, gunfire, a couple of explosions, definitely some people dying.
Is there sometimes audio of a zombie hiding inside a trailer?
Yes, there is.
Like now and then when I'm near a trailer, I think I hear something moving around, and I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. There's also one trapped in the hospital up the stairs.
Oh,
I don't
really?
know if anybody's ever seen that yet. But he's trapped behind there. He's upstairs.
Nothing something.
Yeah, you were very careful about where you put those trapped ones, so
Yeah.
that no one got too confused about zombies that were around you, but not
I
really
can't
there.
get him. I can't find the last zombie.
Yeah.
Hi Cadet, he came in late and he wanted to say hi to me and you, Brant.
Hello, Hi Cadet.
And he asked us when we're going to do the puppet stream. So I mean, we've got the puppets right here behind me. So we kind of every stream is a puppet stream.
That's right.
As long as our little friends are back there. So.
Next time one of us takes a break, that's when the puppets come into play.
True Vulgarian wants to know if you gave your cat a special thanks credit for being involved in the audio.
She's already so needy. I don't even have to.
You give a cat a credit, and it'll ask for a bowl of milk. So P1 Gamer asks, what's up with the dog sounds at night? I don't know what dog sounds he's talking about necessarily, but is that just one of the many?
Yeah, there's some dogs that will bark at night. You'll hear them, in distance, and in the apocalypse, the dogs would have gone feral, and dogs actually revert to being feral fairly quickly.
Yeah, there's parts of the world where there's just huge populations of feral dogs. It just they live there alongside the humans. They're having a parallel little civilization of their own.
I think it really only takes one generation for them to become fully like that again, which is pretty crazy. And so during the day you'll hear them barking off in the distance, and at night you actually will hear the dog packs fighting. So you'll hear some fighting sounds of the dogs.
Wow.
And it just, it's a subtle way to build the world of stuff we don't actually see. We don't actually see the packs of dogs, but...
Luke says that the feral sound is still the best sound in his opinion, but he says whenever he hears a dog barking or a dog howling at night, he's still convinced it's probably a feral. That would be interesting if we came up with an alternate feral that would imitate other animals and try to trick you. Like maybe it sounds like a wounded dog, and it's like, come and help me, I'm a sad dog.
You go there.
Now
There's no dog here.
I'm imagining a feral trying to copy other sounds like quack,
Have like
oink,
an imitation zombie.
oh piggy.
Yeah. Super smart zombies.
See here. Okay, so we've been getting a few questions that aren't audio related. Like for instance, Cupcakes Bro brings up an interesting question more in game design. Are there any plans to allow some sort of character prestige or reset? I tend to abandon my favorites because I can't progress with them anymore. That brings up an interesting, idea. It's like we like the idea of progressing towards a goal with a character and maxing them out, and it feels good to max them out, but then very quickly they get boring, right? And trying to figure out how to keep something like that satisfying over a long period is one of the hardest. Thanks for making that suggestion, but that's one of the hardest problems ever to solve, because you can never make something fully progress infinitely in one direction. Eventually, it outstrips your ability to stay apace with the players.
Yeah, I mean, even Destiny had to kind of start over, right? Destiny 2 had to start you back to the beginning and give a narrative reason for why everybody's powers got stripped away, right?
Yeah, and so New Game Plus type approaches, I've said, prestiging is a really popular tool for that. Where you basically get to do the same thing over again, but better this time.
Yeah.
That's always good. But yeah, that's a good question, and yeah, that's something we should probably be thinking about.
I mean, I think we do a pretty good job at coming at a role-playing game or a game with role-playing elements.
Yeah.
As a community, because you're not one character that you're just going to take to the end of their level up cycle. You got a lot of people to manage.
Yeah.
And so it's the community as a whole that you're trying to bring up to max level, right?
Yeah, and that's one reason why Foggy was really adamant from the very beginning of designing this game that he really wanted there to be an ending. That you can get your entire community all maxed out, and you're at to the point where just they can deal with zombies so well, it's just not even interesting anymore. At that point, you should be prestiging, and you should be ending that game.
Yeah.
And then if you want to bring 3 of those characters into your new game, you can. But those 3 characters are probably going to be recruiting some noobs, and so you can spend some time with those noobs and
Right.
keep and you want to keep the cycle going, so that you're not always on the same characters all the time.
Yeah, and that's right. The reinforces the sort of game theme of rebuilding the world, right? So I mean,
It takes more than
tied
just
that
a handful of survivors to rebuild the world. You got to keep going through a lot of people.
But yeah, I mean, but from a game player's perspective, they just need more content. They chew through that content, and then you need the next cool toy to play with. So
Yeah, so no announcements yet, but we are keeping that in mind. The fact that that you guys are going to need more content and more reasons to keep playing as time goes on. We want to keep supporting the game. Let's see here. Oh, so the Angry Toast says, I don't have this game, but I'm planning to get it. My question is, who do you start with? So when you begin in a brand new game of State of Decay 2, you start with a tutorial, and there's 4 pairs of characters, each of whom have their own different personalities, voices, and skills and stuff like that. And it's actually different. Like each time we generate these characters, we generate them a little bit randomly. There's a few things that stay the same, but a lot of it's random. Do you guys have favorite characters to start with in the game?
I always choose the brother sister.
Oh yeah, how come?
Yeah.
What about them?
Well, I'll give the real answer. No, they don't annoy me as much anymore.
But so you like their dialogue?
Yeah,
better?
I
You can
like
listen to it
their
again and again?
dialogue. I like them as characters when they get into the game, and yeah, I just think if I'm gonna play the tutorial again, I like their tutorial experience the best.
That's cool. Yeah, I really like the 2 friends, the one who's a screw up and the one who's cool guy. Just because that dynamic is interesting, and I like, one of my favorite characters to play in the original game was Ed, just because he was set up to be the loser in the group, and I really wanted to prove him, to be better than that. And so I like taking sort of the loser character from.
I just feel
that
bad
pair.
exiling Daniel, but I'll do it every time.
You're like an underdog.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So Atrell29 says, "I love the game a lot. Will there be a sound of the heart beating when you're near it?" They're asking about what went into the sounds surrounding a plague heart. I guess is probably the real question we want to answer.
Yeah,
It's not really literally a heart, so a beat, like a human heartbeat, would probably be inappropriate. It's just called a heart.
Yeah.
It's not really a heart.
yeah, it ended up getting called a heart in the final iteration.
Yeah, we called them nodes internally for a very long time, and there was no sense that they were trying to make it look like a human heart. So there's no reason why the audio would have gone that direction. But you want to talk a little bit about sort of the audio surrounding plague zombies, plague hearts, because there's a whole different treatment on the voice of the zombies when they're plague infected, right?
Yeah. I mean the plague zombies I might save for Kevin to go into more detail on.
You spend a lot of time on those?
Yeah, but basically they are the same sound source as the generics, as we call them, but we have applied real-time effects on the voice. So
that's less expensive in terms of memory,
Exactly.
but more expensive in terms of processing power. It's more expensive to have those zombies on there because
a little bit.
the CPU is constantly altering the sounds as it's creating them.
Yeah, it's a real-time effect. It's actually a chain of that ultimately creates the sound you hear. Of a few different effects all going on at once. The plague heart, that was actually made out of water. So I had recordings of water splashing and waiting and just movement, and I ran that through some effects, and it got sort of a breathy sound out of it.
Yeah.
And so there's 2 sort of layers going on there. There's the healthy sound, which when you approach it, it sounds kind of like an animal breathing kind of. And then after you've gone through the first damage state, we swap the sound out for something that sounds a little more like full effort trying to get a breath. It sounds kind of
It's like rougher breathing, if you're
rougher,
breathing when
yeah.
you've got some congestion or
Yeah.
or some crap in your throat.
Yeah, it's coming out kind of modulated, like something's in the way. Yeah, so that stuff was made out of water.
Wow.
Yeah.
The plague zombies themselves also have that sort of skin bubbling on them.
Oh yeah.
And then they have some sort of a sort of an attack move that they do that has a little extra. And the skin bubbling on them was a bunch of different sounds. Being one was taking a cable soldering iron that was my friend's, not mine. So sorry for him, I didn't tell him. And dipping it into Coca-Cola and then just burning the sugar. Basically, you burn the sugar and it creates a sort of an acidy sound.
Oh, wow.
And it's
that is fascinating. See, yeah, that's the answer to the.
Yeah.
Did you do any weird
Oh,
things?
yes.
That's a bit weird.
Yeah, that seemed weird to me because I had heard that from somebody telling me that they're like, oh, that's kind of a cool sound, and so I kind of heard that in my head when I thought of the sound. And another sound layer for that is sort of a close-up mic sound of Rice Krispies. When you pour the liquid on them, they kind of
my
that
favorite
little air
sound.
pops out, and so
Crackle pop.
that with just a crap load of compression on it just brings all those little subtle sounds all the way up to the top. And then there's some
Pop rocks in that too.
Oh, Pop Rocks are coming, yes.
Oh yeah. Not yet.
Not
Stay
yet.
tuned.
And then some like mashed up oranges that I had, just like mashing them up, and then it created this really goopy sound.
How disgusting is your kitchen after you've been doing this for a while?
Usually I have a particular blanket that I lay in my studio on the ground, and so
Yeah.
that I can do anything I want to that blanket. And yeah, it gets pretty gross, but I'll just wash it. And then, I feel like there's another sound on that thing too. Oh, bubbling oatmeal. You gotta have the bubbling oatmeal.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
pitch,
glop,
pitch down,
glop,
so it goes the whoop. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that is another one of my favorite sounds.
And then
for
I ate
reality.
it all
You
afterward.
guys have a better. You guys have a better job than I do.
So yeah. So this,
We get to play around with it.
so Hansel Adola wants to know. He wants to know a little bit about like you guys' background, where you came from, like what other projects you've done sound design on in the past.
Sure.
I don't actually know, so
How
I'm
long
curious
have
too.
I- Yeah.
I mean, you said Murdered Soul Suspect.
That was the last game. Basically, I've been at the game audio for 13 years or so.
Wow.
Got my start as an intern at an Activision company working on an X-Men movie tie-in game.
Cool.
And then we worked together at Surreal. Right?
Yeah, before Surreal, I was at Flagship. I worked on Hellgate London. That was kind of like my first big break, I guess, and got the sound design title there. Then ended up in Seattle working with Brent on This Is Vegas, and then ended up at Microsoft on some contracts, Fable 3, and then a few other things, and then Murdered, Soul Suspect, and then Undead Labs. So like
It's a nice variety of very different soundscapes that you kind of got to work with.
a lot of different games, a lot of different companies. That's for sure. It's been like seeing a lot of like just turnover, right? like change. So yeah, it's been nice to be here. I think I've been here the longest out of any of those companies, actually.
I do want Jeffrey to notice that I found him an apocalypse weapon
Nice.
and the 150 round
Oh,
AK.
holy crap!
Oh,
Okay, yeah, thank you. My game's doing really well now.
Did you get that?
My background was quite a bit different than Jordan's. I'm fairly young into the game, and I kind of worked on film before, so I did all
okay.
the sound and mixing and Foley editing for films for maybe 3 or 4 years, pretty solidly up until basically getting a job here. And I've been wanting to get into games and was interested in, so I just built up my skills and then sent my demo reel with Kevin, and he enjoyed the way everything sounded.
So, the transition from film to games, like, was there anything that stood out to you as being surprising or really different?
I kind of had like an idea of kind of what the difference is already, and the thing is that in a film, everything happens the same way every time. You can always make that tree sound that particular creaky to kind of sell the storyline and the emotion of the film, and you kind of know where it's going to go. You can kind of tie in themes from the beginning of the movie all the way to the end and kind of build on it. Whereas in games, Brant might run over this truck or he might jump through that window, and I can't really tell. I can't really say, oh, let's make this grass really creepy because he's about to run into some zombies, because he just might not.
Like, there aren't really as many opportunities for you to tell a linear story with sound. It's more like you're creating a place than creating
You're creating an immersive world. So then you start to think, okay, how do I hear things in real life? So you stand in the trees and you hear like the wind going through all the conifers, where the little needles, and they kind of move really rapidly, and you can turn your head and you hear where the sound is coming from, and that's kind of different. Where in film you can kind of play it as a sort of a bed where the characters can turn and perspectives can shift, and you can do what you can with sound for that, but you as the audience are viewing that as a medium. You're not experiencing it and running around. And then the only other game I worked on is Pillars of Eternity 2, where I did some sound, just some ambient sound for that too.
And that's really different too, because Pillars of Eternity is a top-down isometric game where just I imagine the use of surround or location is it's probably a different setup.
Yeah,
there
it was
here.
left and right.
Yeah. Yeah,
well, that kind of touches on probably, I think a question we got in the beginning is like, what's the biggest challenge? And I think that's kind of it. Like, this game's sort of, the audio side is sort of more than the sum of its parts. Like, and the challenge is, how does all this stuff work together? We don't know what the player's going to do at any given minute, so we have to be thinking on this sort of huge, wide open question, and be able to account for all the different things that can be done and all the different situations you can get into. And that goes back to kind of the mix and what's happening to all the sounds during any given moment. When things are quiet, when things are crazy, we're changing all sorts of levels and the balance of everything going on around you, so that we're giving you the most important audio information that you need to make it exciting and make it understandable what's happening around you. Because you can just turn everything on all at once, and you'll hear everything, but you'll kind of hear nothing because it won't make any sense to you if everything is going on all at the same time.
Jeffrey, can I get rid of one of your outposts to replace it?
Oh,
with a
go
few?
right ahead. This is your game. So Black Ops wants to know, how do you think of all these creative items used to create sounds? Is there like an industry guidebook that you can read, or or is it mostly just word of mouth between sound designers who know each other?
I mean, there are various things like things you've seen before used that are effective, or things you think of. Ultimately, it just kind of comes down to what I've said before. Is it just comes down to the right sound. So you can experiment with a bunch of different things and.
Do you feel like you go through your life a little bit differently than you were before you were a sound designer? Like, are you constantly on the lookout for new things that make new noises?
I carry a recorder with me everywhere I go. I have a handheld recorder, and yeah, it is. Also, I mean, the way you perceive life too is, I always know where a leaf blower is because that just makes me angry, and and yeah, so you always hear things, and the way that things sound from as you approach them, and the way that things sound when they're behind you, and the different frequencies, kind of, how those bounce up around different objects in the world, and.
Yeah. I heard another sound designer kind of answer this question, and I like their answer, and he said, we don't hear any better than anybody, but we just pay more attention. We're just so things like that leaf blower. Most people just can tune stuff out, and it's
there's
just,
a leaf blower, whatever.
Yeah, they sort of naturally do that, but once you start getting into this line of work, you kind of start turning that off because you're just opening yourself up to what does anything sound like, and you're always looking for that information. And so we're just sort of paying more attention than the average person, I think.
The difference between active listening and passive listening.
Yeah.
You can watch a movie and you don't really notice that the traffic's going outside, but if you close your eyes and you think about every single sound that's happening in this room, you could pick out the air fan over here, Brant's controller clicks, Jordan's stomach growling.
Is that annoying you?
This coffee.
One thing I notice, I tend to watch movies and TV shows with subtitles on, and one of my favorite things is with this closed captioning, like they will call out noises that I didn't necessarily notice because of the distractions in the room.
Descriptive.
Yeah, it's like it's great. And my favorite thing too is when they've cut off-screen dialogue from the final mix, but it's still in the subtitles.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
So you can see somebody said something extra that didn't end up in the final mix, or whatever in the final cut. Let's see here. Okay, so we've been getting a few more questions. Like some of the questions we've been getting that were a little bit more off topic were about upcoming DLC, upcoming expansions, added content, that sort of thing. And we unfortunately don't have anything specific we can say aside from what's already been announced. The fact that those who bought the Ultimate Edition are going to get 2 DLC packs at no additional charge. One of them is called the Independence Pack. The other one is called Daybreak. And those are the only ones that we've announced, and unfortunately we don't have a lot to say about those. But we really appreciate you folks who are interested in seeing more content, whether it's those packs or other things we might do in the future. It really kind of it helps light a fire under us hearing you guys constantly be interested in seeing more content for this game. It makes us excited.
Did you say Independence Pack?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I started with Independence Pack, then I said Daybreak.
Because that one kept these guys really busy. That's
Yeah.
all I was saying about that.
That's true. I'm actually looking forward to when we can talk more about that, show some of the work that you guys did to make that one. Yeah, because there's some pretty insane stuff that came out with that. Which, a few people in the chat I know have already seen leaks of some of the things that are coming with the Independence Pack. Yeah, but because they brought it up to me on Discord. But I'll just leave that aside. But anyway.
Who was it?
No, it wasn't anybody here. But let's see here. Oh, yeah, so one last question before we go. Hansa Lodolo asks, did you guys record fireworks going off? Was that the most fun day, shooting fireworks and recording audio? Or was that stuff all from a library somewhere?
Because
we've got so many little fireworks and firecrackers and things like that in the game.
So yeah, we didn't do any specific fireworks session for this for this pack because we just had a lot of that stuff already.
Well, I just mean for the game in general because we got fireworks and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, like you know, you
Yeah.
stab into the ground, it goes off. Like, was there a recording session for that, or?
No, there wasn't anything specific for that stuff because we like all combined in our personal libraries, and there's some really great boutique libraries, as we call them, that just had a lot of that stuff.
Here's a million fireworks. Go.
Just kind of like
Yeah, I mean,
did a
they,
really great
they
job.
launch off $500 worth of fireworks and record it, and then it only costs, you know, a small amount of money to be able to get it. And
Because then if a lot of people buy it, then
Yeah.
that pays them the $500
you kind of
plus.
pick little
Yeah.
bits from each one and recombine them. And
Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of a mix of some of those boutique libraries
slow me
and
down.
some stuff that we had gathered personally over the years. So there wasn't a specific session for that, just because it wasn't necessary. We had everything already.
Well, that was our last question for the audio team. So thank you guys so much for coming here and doing this. Like, I feel like I learned a ton,
Oh, good.
and I you know like work near you guys every day, and so you know we definitely should have you guys in more.
Yeah.
We should have Kevin come in to talk about the whole music side of things.
yeah, and he can go into a lot of depth about the freaks as well. And
Yeah.
So,
and
yeah,
the-
because he
and
spent a
the
lot of time with
zombies.
those.
Yeah, and the zombie voices and stuff, and the music system would definitely be good topics for him.
Yeah. And dialogue too. So
And the
it-
dialogue process, yeah.
there's so much different audio stuff that goes into a game that it's just you can't you can talk about it for days and days and just barely
Yeah.
scratch the surface.
Yeah, I think that's one of the unique things about it is, of all the departments, we have our hands in everything. Like,
Yeah.
we have to touch every single system of the game and cover it with sound.
Yeah,
so-
and
so
it's so easy to forget. I mean, like one of the sort of I don't know the well-known annoyances in the game industry is that is people just forgetting to ask audio about things. Like we'll have meetings, we'll figure out entire features, and we'll spend months on something, and then somebody will say, "Hey, did anyone mention it to an audio designer?"
Yeah,
and we'll be like, "Oh crap!"
yeah, that happens.
'Cause-
Because sometimes it's just like we just think fundamentally maybe differently too. Sometimes about where sound's gonna play and how and we're nitty gritty worried about how far away you can hear that stream and that might sound like really like focused and really like nitty gritty stuff, but like we're asking those kinds of questions like all day long, constantly. We're worried about those really tiny details.
And like I said, you know, when you guys are at the top of your game, you know, people just feel emotions, they notice things, but they don't realize that they're doing it because of the audio. And so it's very easy for us to not realize how critical your contribution is to every single feature in this game. You know, until you know, until it's not there, and then we're like, oh, wait a minute, I forgot. There's
Yeah.
something missing from here. What is it?
Yeah.
And and it's you guys work. So anyway, thank you so much for coming in, and
Cool.
thank you
Thanks
for
for
doing
having us.
all of the
Thanks,
great work you
everybody.
guys did on this game. I think everyone here in the chat and everything is all just really thrilled to have had you guys working on this project.
Yeah,
so
yeah, we're happy to keep going on this stuff and
yeah.
keep the fans.
Well, and as usual, thanks everyone for taking time out of your day to come hang out with us.
Yep. And we'll just say goodbye to Alex Thomas and Jordan Stock, and we'll get out of here.